Yeah, so if I bump this, it's not changing the microphone. It's not hitting anything.
Got
So
it. Okay.
Eric would know. I don't. He knows more than I do.
Yeah. Eric, you
He's
suck
not
and I
on
hate you.
yet.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, what's up, man? We were
Hey.
just
Hey,
talking about you.
buddy.
Oh, what did I
How are
do?
ya?
Nothing. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Odd Testament podcast. My name is Ryan.
My name is Eric.
Hi, I'm Greg.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us, guys. This is the place where we dive deep into the weird, strange, odd, curious stories of the Bible. And whether you're new to faith or you're just here for a laugh or looking for a fresh perspective on Scripture, this is the place for you. So glad to have you join us. Want to say it right off the bat, like and subscribe so you always get our newest content right away. Stay up to date with us. We'd love to have you guys along for the ride with us. Today, we are going to get into the flood story in this episode number 4. But before we do that, guys, I wanted to ask you a get to know you question.
Mm-hmm.
What if there was any conspiracy theory that you've heard that you would think is the most plausible, most realistic, most likely to actually be reality? Which one would you say it is, and why?
That's a tough one. I believe I would say I don't believe in every conspiracy theory, but I don't think those things just happen by accident. Like they don't like there is a reason why the idea. So hear me out, Greg, especially you. Hear me out. Okay.
Just listen. No, seriously.
Just no. Just listen, okay? The fluoride in the water. No, I'm just kidding. But I think there's like you know what they say, like in every joke there's a nugget of truth, like so if you're like, you say something kind of sarcastic or teasing, like there's a little bit of truth in there. Like so I think every conspiracy has like a nugget of truth. So here's mine, and I 100% believe this is that the Illuminati is real. Okay. Now the trick, all right, Kaiser Soze style, is convincing people that the devil's not real by making it like silly and fun. So I'm not saying like Beyonce and Jay-Z are in the Illuminati, but the top tier people in power have access to a certain level of information and guide the direction of information and resources throughout our entire earth. And the whole fact that we have national political powers that somehow look like they have authority and all that stuff is like there, but it's a construct in order to like essentially control people. And so I don't think like they're doing like these like, but I think there is like a guiding group of people, not it and self-elected, and like so I bet it's all gross and stupid and it's like that. But I think the version of that there is a group of people that all decide this is how we're going to sway our money, how we're going to sway our power, how we're going to move different things. I think that absolutely happens. And I think if you look at a couple things happening right now, you would go, yeah, there is a lot of people pushing money and power and positions, and you'd go, why are they in there? What's happening? And you go, I think there might be some that's mine. Okay. Illuminati's real. That's it.
Okay. Interesting. Greg, what about you?
I can't think of one. I'm trying. I really, really am.
Loch Ness Monster?
There's something, but it's not like there's a giant sea monster in there. There's not. That's
Area 51.
that place exists, but whether there are alien bodies and stuff. I have, not to be political, I have a hard time thinking that our current president, if there were these giant secrets, that he would be somebody who could keep those secrets. That doesn't mean I'm right. Someone's raging right now. I'm also assuming people are listening, which would be awesome. But so I really do hope somebody's just raging. Oh my gosh, he just talked about President Trump. Because that would mean someone's listening.
That's a good impression.
Would make me just really, really happy. Of whoever it is. Exactly, of whoever it is. So that's my hesitancy. This is less of a, I believe in a conspiracy. I'm sure there's got to be something, but why I don't is because we can't figure out how to do the smallest things, much less people agree enough to do something giant. People can't, whoever the alphas and sigmas are, can't stand being in the same room with each other, much less agree long enough to get anything truly accomplished. And so one of them has to be in charge of everybody, and how in the world they're getting that done. It would be, I mean, I wouldn't, if I was in that and some idiot was telling me this is how we're going to run the world. Well, listen, Agent Chaos, I disagree. I think we should do it this way. And I can't imagine. And then the requirements for secrecy and stuff are just, it's impossible. There's just no way.
But that's why you'll never sit in a seat of power, because you're not willing to play ball. Okay. Like,
right, because
gotta,
yeah, exactly.
All I hear that you're saying is you think Walt Disney's head is frozen underneath the castle. That's what. Am I hearing you correctly, or is the microphone not
you're
working?
You're hearing me say, yeah. We're going. Yes, that's definite. The magic from his head is what
got to get the power somewhere.
Disney magic, yeah. Those little sparklies that go over at the beginning of every Disney movie. That's a representation of his magic.
Walt Disney's dandruff.
Yeah, good. More clarity we can get on that, the better. So anyway, that's where I land pretty hard. I'm confused by the idea of conspiracies because I've met people. Yeah.
All right.
We can't agree on the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight or any night. And somehow people are agreeing globally that this is the direction we're going to go. Man, a lot. Yeah.
Man. Ryan, I'm interested in yours. What is your conspiracy theory that you think is true?
I don't know if I want to share it anymore.
Now you're like, oh, my eyes have been open. I guess
Captain Buzzkill.
No, Greg the wet blanket, man.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm trying.
My fire.
Yeah, it's that Debbie Downer sketch from SNL.
Okay, so
I can also say I don't want to believe in conspiracy theories. So
sure.
There you go.
Yeah, X-Files.
So is that like a confirmation bias thing where like you find enough proof to like fit what you want to believe? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think I am right.
Okay. You take the blue pill is what you're saying. If Morpheus said, go back to your old life and forget everything I just told you, or take the red pill and then like wake up in the land of robots, you're like, let's go back to steak being fake, you know?
The thing is, you don't know until you know in that case, right? I mean, that choice isn't a real choice because you don't know the other side. Do you want to know the real thing? You don't know the real thing. Once you know the real thing, you're like, oh no, let me go back.
Well, let's just see how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Right. Yeah. And then you find out it's terrible. Wait a minute. I'm just a torso and a head.
All right, Ryan, I need to hear yours because I can't be alone. You gotta save me.
No. Like I said, as I get older, I'm becoming more of a conspiracy guy. And so not that I think all of them are true. By the way, side note, there's a comedian, his name's Ron Funches. Have you guys ever heard of him?
Yeah.
So he has this bit on conspiracy theories. He starts it talking about like, now I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. He goes, but I do think that some of them we should pay attention to some of them, or that kind of thing. And I think he kind of like pulls the room kind of, like to try to gauge like who's a conspiracy person with me, and almost nobody raises their hand in the one that in the bit that I saw, and he goes, okay, you people scare me. He goes, you people really think the government is batting 1,000? You really think they're telling us the truth about everything? He goes, that's scary, I'm like,
yeah, that's even crazier than
right,
that nothing happened. Really? It's
Yeah.
all been perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So with that said, I would say I thought about the whole 9/11 was an inside job thing, but that's not the one I think is most probable. I do think like aliens as a like conspiracy theory is the most probable. Area 51, Roswell, all that stuff. Just the evidence that has come out, the stories, the evidence that continues to come out, the eyewitness testimonies. Now, can some of the people be kooks? Sure, I don't know, but
only
like, are millions of people all making this stuff up? Like, I don't know. And then like I read an article this week, and like I forget what it was, but it seemed credible, where there's some gigantic pyramid somewhere.
His great uncle had a PhD, therefore.
Come on,
my aunt wrote an article. And
don't be a wet blanket, Greg. Don't be a
I had a weird poop.
So I read this article, man, I should have saved it, where it was about this huge step pyramid, and these archaeologists and scientists came to the conclusion that it was not man-made. And so I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like, what's going on with that? So I'm like, okay, like there's got to be something there, and I've heard I don't know, I've heard people talk about like when Jimmy Carter won the presidency back in the 70s, how he was briefed on Area 51 and what's really down there, and he put his head in his hands and he wept because it was so terrifying, that kind of thing. Like you hear stories like that, I'm like you said, Eric, like there's got to be something to it, even if it's not exactly what the people, there's got to be something there. So
I'll join you in this. I think there is. I don't know. I like the idea of alien life existing, but I like the idea of time travelers. Now that one's a little shaky, as if my other one was more legit, because I have cold hard facts. But I like the idea that aliens are actually future humanity, that have like, and they realize in order to progress humanity, they need to be the butterfly effect of the rest of humanity. So I like that theory, that we're getting these glimpses of things and all that type of stuff, because it's time traveler, future humanity. So but again, that I don't know, I love sci-fi. It's my favorite stuff to read is sci-fi novels, and like Star Wars and time travel and AI systems, and and spaceships, and I love that. Interstellar is one of my favorite movies, like,
which I still haven't seen.
You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it.
Gosh, so good.
Total side note, I realized that someone I work with, Pastor Raphael Aristide, shout out, has never seen The Princess Bride. So I just feel like I need to shame people who haven't seen that. So
That's good.
I did figure out my conspiracy theory, though.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. And it's still a downer. I think the ones that are real are obvious, that they're out and about. We don't think of them as conspiracies because they're so just there, such as
COVID. You think COVID was created in a lab?
No, the opposite. I think COVID was real. As far as where it was created or how it all happened and stuff. Look, what I have is that we have to deal with it. This would be Eric, actually, is that this is here's the information. What are we going to do with it? So where you really work. But I think that the reverse this isn't real. This is all the weirdness with, I don't know, I don't want to go overboard, but they're just people attacking things that are correct. And wrong information is a conspiracy, and its intentionality over a large group of people is absolutely insane. And that to me is absolutely a conspiracy.
And I'm just saying, someone is pushing that agenda. Okay, Greg. All
That
right.
is what I'm saying. I think there's
Illuminati.
multiple people, but and I disagree
You
with
do
that.
believe.
Now, you would, if you were going to build that, I think you would have to do it through definitely money. I mean, that's the money, power, and then money. That would be my guess in that order. But you then would look to wars and the creation of not just wars, but conflict. Conflict creates money or something.
We used to call it the Knights of
You
Templar.
don't want it to win.
Then like it's there's always been some sort of power struggle, and someone holds the most amount of power and does the most things globally. So I'm just saying.
Final thing, because we're way down this rabbit hole. There are I interpret it one way, you guys might interpret it the opposite, which is so at some point there was like this rumor about Democrats stealing babies, or liberals doing God knows what with babies and stuff. My reason I go, yeah, I've actually read that, but it was in the Middle Ages when when people were attacking the wealthy, and saying they were doing these rituals and things like that. I did a study on Satanism and things like that, and so that's where I found these stories, and they were remarkably similar to the current stories. And so if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're going, because it's real. And these rituals have been happening for centuries, if not eons. Millennia, guys, the same rituals. I go, no. They're just dumb stories that people are making up because they're scared of everything.
That recycle it. It's like Hollywood. There's no original IP anymore. Everything's just borrowed stories.
Yeah, Shakespeare ruined it all.
Yeah, and today we want to talk about the Bible. And
the book.
Here's the thing, though. I don't know. I think to read the Bible, not to overly transition, but to read the Bible is having to choose to believe a certain amount of things do have this, even if it's an I don't know kind of thing. Like, I think that's like, honestly, I mean, some of the reason why the whole Christian movement, I think, is played upon is because they're the easiest to make believe. Almost anything, because they already believe like a virgin birth. Like that is such a large stretch, like from what we would ever know as reality. And so like it's very easy to look at like someone who's already taken that jump and go, well, but metal only burns at a certain degree. So I'm just saying rocket fuel doesn't cause that much, or like plane fuel or whatever it is. And so you just don't like the jump to like everyday actions that you could see probably isn't that far. So I don't know. I'm susceptible. I'll just say that I'm susceptible to the many crazy theories. Anyways,
not only did the moon landing not happen, there is no moon.
Kubrick, baby. That's he filmed it, and
Ryan, this is your fault.
Yes, it is.
Where's the edit point?
I own that.
Yeah.
I will say this, and this might alienate some listeners. Who knows? I think one of the craziest, like weirdest conspiracy theories is that the Earth is flat. I think that's strange because most flat earthers don't deny that the rest of the planets in our solar system, they're spheres, but for some reason, just the Earth is a disc. I'm like, what? Really? Come on. Like, I think that's
I can
weird,
get mad pretty quick, so I try to avoid things that make me mad. Make me mad makes me a victim that I have a hard time not being mad about. And so that's one of them. And I've never met anyone who's actually a flat earther that I would be able to interview, because that was I once met, or we lived out in Utah, and I was able to speak with Mormons and things like that, because that's what I really like to do. When I don't understand something, find somebody who that I can't get my head around, find somebody who really believes it, and try to engage them and try to figure out what is reasonable about this thing and stuff. And so I've never met that, but I cannot that flat earth. Seriously, that's when's it not a conspiracy? And it's just, oh, you're dumb.
I'll let you
But
know.
they're not all morons. I'm not saying they can't pass a test, but there's something they're not processing.
Just not physics.
Who knows? Right. Like, I don't know. I can't even make it up. I don't even know enough about it to make fun of it, because I can't comprehend it. Yeah.
Well, now that I got you riled up, Greg, you ready to get into our content for the day?
I don't know if I'll be able to move off.
So the last couple of weeks, we've been diving into
Talk about essential oils after this.
Yeah, right. diffuse away.
We're just trying to ruin all the listeners. Sorry.
So the last couple of weeks we have dove into creation. We looked at, is Elohim multiple gods, or is it the way God was talked about before he named himself? And then we looked at the actual creating each day, and creating the different realms and filling the realms and order and function and all that. And now we're going to jump to Genesis 6. So between what we talked about the last time and this time, Cain and Abel happened, where Cain kills his brother Abel. And then we see the genealogy of Adam. And now we come to our story in Genesis chapter 6. And I'm just going to read it, and then we can discuss. Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 1, it says, "Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. So really quickly, before we keep going, so part of this podcast is we want to try to help demystify scripture a little bit, right? We want to try to help make it a little bit more palatable for people who maybe are intimidated by it, or maybe people who've gotten bad interpretations. I know for a fact there are people who get hung up on verse 2. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives, and they interpret that as deities, angels, lesser gods. They came down and they had sex with women, and that was what spawned Nephilim, and that's where we get giants and werewolves and crazy things, guys. We just talked about conspiracy theories, but there are people who actually believe this stuff. That werewolves are real, and it's their Bigfoot is real, and he's offspring of this sons of God mating with daughters of men. What are you guys thoughts about that?
Yeah, tons of. I mean, there's a lot. I always, especially when I come to stuff like this, I like going reading different translations, but then also reading commentary of people who have done a lot of the work on stuff like this. But sons of God to the daughters of man. I read through C.S. Lewis's the Chronicles of Narnia before I read through the Bible, and so that word or that phraseology of sons of Adam and daughters of Eve is like a running theme through the stuff that he does. And so when I kind of came across this, I was like, I remember reading it for the first time, just going oh, just humans. But I think the extended thing, very similar to like Greek mythology, where you got Achilles and things like that, where you heighten an individual's story, where they become like larger than life beings. And so the way I come across this story is we're getting the origins of what it means to like be people of power. So like the establishment of like authority figures. And so like if you were an ancient tribe or a beginning tribe, what would you value? You would value resources or violence, or sexual prowess, like things like that. That would be like these keep things moving forward. So if you do more of it and you do it well, if you make more kids, then suddenly you become this like godlike figure. So I've always taken it that way. But like I think we've said before, I've the part of it of like, oh yeah, it's these deity type things that create demigods. Sure, like we see examples in the Bible of superhuman acts, supernatural, superhuman acts. So I don't know if it has to be that far away for it to be truth, but and maybe what empowered some of these crazy legendary tales could be some of that. So I don't know. But yeah, I usually come across as like large authority figures or like the beginnings of kings and queens, and it's encapsulating that in a verse,
Nice. Yeah, I go multiple levels. The main one I want to come back to, make sure I do, is what is the story? What's the point of adding these in to the narrative that's going on here? So before I get to that, as much as I want to make fun of conspiracy theories, I don't want to make fun. I want to really buy into the fact that there's a ton we don't know. And there's this great man. I wish I could remember what great quote, and I can't remember off the top of my head who it is, but it's where Scripture is silent, let us have the wisdom to be silent as well. And this doesn't mean we can't think about it. But is there any information or data to bring us to take us anywhere other than what this story is doing? No, there's just none. We've got sons of God. This, I'll mispronounce it, Benai Elohim. And are they angels? Are they angels who had kids and they're the kids of those, or are they the kids of great people before? Is this a Tolkien Gondor kind of thing, that there used to be great men, not excluding women, but great humankind and humans, and as far as significant, and they live longer and all these other things? If you want to go that way, that's fine. It's not going to accomplish anything. Let's say you go, oh, these guys are the giants and things like that. Okay. And that has gotten you where? What is this? Has it moved you anywhere as far as something, especially something that's going to affect today, but that does anything inside the story that's going to move anything along? And it does zero. These are interests, but they accomplish very, very little.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, great.
The part of this being introduced, I think, brings up a big question of God's allowance of something like this. Like we kind of talked about it in our episode about original sin and in the gardens like that, and there's a free will allowance, and then we mess up and then we're kicked out of the garden. And I think there's a defense of like we're left to our own devices, yet God still has an extreme judgment on us, even though he's left us to our own devices. I mean, I don't know. Can you help me reason with that a little bit? I think that somebody would probably be asking that question of like, well, cool. There is silence, yet there is the part that is written in here that tells us that this happened, and that at least the writer is telling us, is he just trying to give an example of the warriors of ancient times of how we got to this place? Yeah. Or is he trying to tell like, yeah, God has he's left us to our own free will, and yet he still has a judgment on us, even though he's left us to our own devices? Like, is that fair? Is that I don't know, especially as we're ramping up into a really big action.
Yeah, what I'm getting ready to say, I don't want to take away from those questions. Those questions exist, but where we place them, do we have a hold of the story? When I'm trying to think things through, I go, what do I know about the story? What is it doing? And then where does it fit? I would also like to challenge, allow the challenge of our question itself. So if we were like, we add in free will, for example, like possibly have. Sometimes I see myself in the camera, by the way, and I'm like, why is my hair doing that? I feel like it. Thank you. Anyway, that's the joys of ADD. You just got to let it out. Anyway, but this seems for me to be set against Mesopotamia stuff, that in these other epics and legends, there's giants and things like that. If we're just saying, why is it in here? So there's a response to that. It's doing work against those things. It's defining, it's taking these well-known stories at the time and saying, here's our, in the light of a Yahweh, of a creator who doesn't need to war against anything to set order, to quell chaos. This is the type of God we're looking at. And yet there are these things, these forces that are now on the planet. Kind of where did they come from? But do we have any, as far as current readers, we go, okay, something's going on. Do we have any other, do we have access to any information that isn't other than that this is, it seems really remarkably close to these others. And so is it doing any other work than that? And personally, I go, I don't really need it to, but you know, it becomes a ghost story, I guess, for me, in that I don't need ghosts to exist. But I'm also, if you're like, ghosts totally exist, I wouldn't be like, oh no, really? I just, there, you could take that for, or do that picture for it. Because it hasn't done any work. I haven't created a world that I need things to be so narrow that I can't handle new information and new data. I don't mean that like, oh, I'm such a hero and such a genius. I just simply mean that we can allow more information in and continue to grow. So I think back to the thing I really want to make is being able to challenge the question is, okay, this is how the questions are coming. Is that the right form of the question? If I'm not coming up with an answer, am I asking the right question? Are the questions even valid? Are they relevant at this point? And so we have a lot of people. I've met people who are like, I want to challenge the status quo. Okay, then do it. Challenge even the questions you're asking. Are they the right forms of these questions? Or is this the right spot for those questions? They can exist, but let's understand, you know, for us as readers, for me, the primary that starts out in Genesis 1 is there's God. Okay. So that's everything is built on this thing. So that's going to be my non-negotiable. Next would be God created everything, and he seems to have made humankind as the pinnacle of his creation. It's super important. Up against other narratives, humans are super important. They're not just cattle or slaves. There's some purpose, which brings us to what Eric was talking about. Now we get to this place and the flood's getting ready to happen. So if I'm a writer, I'm like, well, I probably need to justify the flood. So what's going on? Why would there be a flood? Because of these things. For example, there's insane, crazy giants that are running around that came from somewhere. And for me, rather than get excited about Nephilim, I'm really interested in where the story's going. You get stuck. It's like watching The Matrix, but only watching that first scene where Trinity's running around. You go, oh, that's awesome. And then someone comes up, yeah, did you see the end? Yeah, she ran around the room and then got free. What? No, you didn't see the end. You didn't.
Yeah.
You missed the entire movie because you got lost in the beginning.
Yeah. What about you, Ryan? Is that kind of how you come across it? But I mean, this does open up, this larger picture of like these deity potentials and things like that. How are you approaching it?
I have a few different thoughts. I mean, I believe that everything is in the Bible is in there intentionally. But I also ask the question every time I read, I ask the question, is this prescriptive or is it descriptive? Is it just trying to describe a situation and that's it? Or is it trying to get my attention? And with this, I think it's more descriptive than prescriptive. Honestly, I just would it be crazy if this race of giants actually existed? 100% it'd be crazy. I'd be fascinated if it ever came out that it was like 100% true. It's scientifically proven a race of giants existed, and start doing. I would be fascinated. Does we've mentioned it before in all the other in all the other podcasts that we've done. Does it change the story? No, it doesn't. So whether or not it's real or not, or figurative or whatever, doesn't really matter to me. Is it like historiography or historicity, right? Is it just the way that history is being told and presented, or is it authentic history? You know what I mean? Like that's not the point of the text. It's again, we mentioned it last week and the week before. It's not a science book. It's not a history book. It's making very specific claims, and specifically Genesis chapter 1 through 11 is a very different genre of literature than any of the rest of the Bible. It's cosmology literature, which has totally different rules than narrative or poetry or letters, or even like in Revelation. Revelation is apocalyptic, right? It's apocalyptic, it's prophetic, and it's a letter, right? And it's completely different than the cosmology. You know what I mean? Like, totally. So to your average person who doesn't understand those things about scripture, that it is written in different styles and there are different claims being made, and all that stuff, like, I think it is really easy for them to get hung up on the what shoes was I wearing, to use your analogy last week, Greg. Like what color were my shoes, or what color were the shoes? Like, it doesn't matter, it just doesn't matter.
Blue's the color of the spirit.
Right.
Jesus endorsed this. It's clear that Jesus was there.
Yeah, right. And in verse 4, it just kind of goes into it a little bit more, which I think just reinforces people's questions when they don't understand what they're reading. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who would become the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. And so, like, that is really all it says about it. And it doesn't really give us any more information. If it wanted us to know all about it, there would be way more information, way more data about it.
We get we get an interesting thing in that verse 4, where because verse 5 starts with the extent of their human wickedness. Like, here's the sin. The potentially 2 examples that we get of what that wickedness is in 4 verses is that there is something heavenly realm invading earth in a way that God didn't plan. And then the second thing, then there was a sexual depravity of some kind then attached to that, and God attaches human wickedness to these things. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's getting where the story's going. I think that's the push. Is we're returning to chaos. Where there was order, now we've got disorder. More profound than the future Judges, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This is utter insanity, and Judges gets crazy. But this is way worse of what is being described here.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that I think it's trying to paint a picture that all of creation is going down the toilet, not just
Mhm.
humanity. All of
Mhm.
creation is suffering because of what Adam and Eve did.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I think that's the picture it's trying to paint.
That's
And
good.
so to get hung up on giants and
Yeah.
did gods come down and have sex with women? That again doesn't matter. All of creation is now corrupted because
Yeah.
of what Adam and Eve did. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
And I mean this genuinely. If you want that, then sure. Uh, um, but stick with the point of the story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what was going on. Okay. Is everything decreating? Is
Yeah.
are we returning?
Decreation.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Then
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Then if you feel like there's more information than I feel,
Mhm.
awesome. But just make sure we're not jumping off as if
Yeah.
that's the important thing.
Well, it's an interesting thing, I think, to note, like the story that we have skipped over. Not that we aren't maybe going to go back someday, is the Cain and Abel. But I love that that decreation. God's entire initiative is creation, life, and then the moment that we make a choice that we want to choose how to manage life for ourselves, it immediately starts this spiral of decreation. And so we get first murder almost right off the bat. Like it's so quick is we immediately start decreating. And then then it just whatever that, if that was the kickoff, and then as Cain goes and settles and all the things start kind of building up from there. And now we're I love what you said, Ryan. We are at the pinnacle point of the spiral, and everything's moving really, really fast, and just hasn't gone down the drain completely yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's too important to address just really quickly, and then we can move on. But there are people that I know of that they get hung up on this Nephilim, Rephaim, giant, son of God, all that, and because there's not a ton of data in Scripture, they use extra biblical literature to prove that Scripture, to form their thoughts about it. So specifically the book of Enoch, there's the people that I've heard that use the book of Enoch to talk about how this is 100% true and it really happened, and the watchers and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh, you got to be really careful with that, because the book of Enoch is not in the Bible for a reason. Not that we should completely discard it, because there are some Scripture, some people in Scripture that actually reference the book of Enoch, but it's not in Scripture for a reason. Like it's not canonized. It's So just I would caution anybody out there, if you're looking to extra biblical resources, that's great, but don't give it the same authority that you give Scripture. Scripture's the ultimate authority, and everything else is kind of just bonus. If that, I don't know, maybe I'm not even saying that right, but
No,
yeah.
I think that's good. Edifies what edifies versus take away, and gives you a chance to edify, gain a perspective in the same way you would read history that partners alongside the Bible during the history times that we start reading. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and if you want to do what ifs, then Book of Enoch does some of that for you. Some of the other random things about angels and stuff that these angels had these names and stuff like that. Fine, just I don't want to make it silly. You did most of the work there, so but just remember the central text. Try not to violate the central text, because that's the story that we believe is central.
What's interesting to even this topic is there's potentially some of the motivation, maybe not even just potentially, but outright motivation of Moses's writings and who he's writing to is to prevent the thing that most people are trying to do, which is create new gods, create new idols, create new figures that feel more real than the God who is real. And so if we're not careful, we're going to completely misuse the text for what it was originally trying to use, which was not create new idols in our life, and move forward.
That's
I think there's
good. I
plenty
mean,
of,
go for it, Greg.
No, I was gonna say there's plenty of information here to get really into.
Yeah.
You actually don't need to dive if you haven't covered all the other stuff. Then I'd encourage you to do that. If while doing this, you go into, like Ryan mentioned, the book of Enoch and stuff, then great. But man, I wonder, like, people read about the people bring in the lady caught in adultery to Jesus, and they're like, what did Jesus write in the dirt? If it was relevant, don't you think they would have said it? And so they make up what ifs and things like that, and that are fun to preach about maybe for those who are doing it. But we don't really, there's so much interesting about the world that we can actually get a hold of and talk about and stuff, to make stuff up. Man, I don't really totally get it, but anyway.
Yeah, Eric, you said something that I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right, about when maybe Moses was writing in a way to try to keep us from, having these thoughts of other gods, or whatever, like however you put it. And I'm like, oh, totally, he's totally doing that. I just think about in Genesis, where he talks about when God was creating, he created the big light and the little light. He didn't call them sun and moon because those were names of deities. He just said, nope, he created the big light to govern the day and the small light to govern the night, because they're just things. It's just stuff. They're not deities. You know what I mean? Like he is trying to remove that. And so I think that's a really good thought, man.
Yeah.
So,
Noah. What's God?
Yeah. Let's go. Verse 5, chapter 6, verse 5. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. There's that decreating thing that's going on. And he mentions the things he creates. So verse 17, look, I'm about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die, but I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, male and female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal, every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and all the animals. So Noah did everything exactly as God commanded him.
Exactly. That's a key word right there. Like,
first use of the word covenant, which means treaty. So this is being placed, and we were just talking about extra biblical stuff. What I'm getting ready to talk about is in a form extra biblical. I'm going contextual. So how I get to this place is I'm like, okay, I'm reading the story. Is there anything what can I figure out? What can I look into? Is anyone doing research about this time and things like that? Some of the data, you're going to find different scholars who are going to say, different things and stuff like that. What seems to be consensus is that there were other documents in that time. We talked about them over the last 2 weeks, and this week we talked about Numa Elish before, but now we're the flood story is also in something called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and what we have are a series of stories, and Tower of Babel is going to be another one that this kind of shows up in different stuff. But what we have are popular stories that are known, oral traditions that are going around that are being retold by who we believe is Moses is the writer or whoever wrote these, but they're being retold from at this time unique perspective, saying that there's not a war between multiple gods. But there is this evil in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The reason, and I think I talked about this last week, the reason they're wiped out is because of they're noisy. Basically, there's too many humans, and so they're messing up the ability for the gods to rest. So then they wipe one of the gods then decide it's going to be a flood, but they overdo it. And the other gods are now hungry and they don't have anyone to feed them. So sacrifices are the way that they would be fed. So they're mad at this little god that did this. And it's fun. But when you realize the reason there's parallels and you're like, well, I thought this was all unique. It wasn't unique. They're using these stories to make a point. And so what we can do is, what can we see as the point coming through here, is my initial thoughts without any question. I just got excited. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you got like you said, every culture has some sort of world ending disaster type thing. You get Atlantis, you get, and a lot of it to do with water. Water is a very powerful tool, and obviously this isn't the first time we start seeing water used not just for life, but also death. Not to overly stretch it, because that's not what this story is. But for me, what becomes really powerful is the symbolism of water becoming an important symbol. You start looking in the stories of Exodus and then Deuteronomy of how water is life, and God, and the Israelites are constantly asking for water, and it comes from places of nowhere. But then all the way up to baptism and how that means something, that there is a life and death aspect to this as well. So this could begin the journey for a few people of starting to look at water, not again overly connecting. You don't need to connect dots that aren't there, but open yourself up to now that when the Bible starts presenting water, and it's using that as a symbolist, like using symbolism in there, it means something. Whenever the writer brings that up and God is bringing that to the front of the story, there's a lot that is meant to be put in there, so
Good.
Yeah, it's good. One of the things that I get, I don't know if fixate is the right word, but it just gets all my focus when I read this story is verse 5. And verse 5 lays out, I think, exactly the whole point of this flood. And is the Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. And then he says, man, like he's sorry that he ever made humans. And that is the exact opposite of what happened when he made humans in Genesis 1. He saw that it was very good, right? So he goes from very good to completely sorry that he made them at all in just this couple chapters. Like that's a pretty big swing, you know what I mean? And so I think too, regarding what you said about these other religious texts and the flood story that they have, and the gods flooded the earth and killed humans because they were too noisy, what I think it tells us, what does our God care about?
Exactly.
Our God cares about
that's the
wickedness, and not being wicked. He doesn't want us to be wicked. He wants us to be righteous, and that's the point. that's what we need to get hung up on. Again, the giants, Nephilim, all that stuff, that's great after we understand the point, and
exactly.
That's the point. Our God cares whether or not we're wicked. He cares about our righteousness. And so that's my thoughts. So.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of keep pushing a little bit of the story in chapter 7, God's conversation with Noah, right in verse 1 is, I can see that you alone are righteous. You are the one. Righteous then becomes a great theme. Greg, I think you're probably one that words meaning something important to you. What we don't get a definition of righteous outside of Noah. Like Noah is the definition of that. and still we get only a glimpse of what Noah just isn't wicked.
Mhm.
So is righteousness just not being wicked? Is it just doing what we think is right? Is it God's right? I don't know. Maybe open up the word righteous a little bit.
I would flip that.
Yeah.
In the sense that darkness isn't a thing; it's a absence of light. And tov, there's not when there's tov and ra. So and ra they interpret as evil, but it's mostly not tov, as far as my reading on it. So it's not that evil is this opposite thing, but instead a lack of what is good. And so I like I didn't make up a word, but I made up a word in the sense of where it's applied. So where I read righteous, I think of rightness. And so, and it's mostly because I do push against what have become popular words. They become overused. They're the correct word, but sometimes they're overused to the point that we don't think about them anymore.
Yeah.
And so I want to, sometimes I want to help push the definition or the idea that is trying to be communicated. And there's a right way to be, a good thing. And what we see in if violence and everything is the way of the world before the flood, I think what we're being communicated is someone who isn't that, who isn't in the sense morally in the line of Cain and whoever, and I think it's Lamech, who's if Cain gets 7, I get 77 times 7. So I think that's the one. Where we're not unsafe, but what I don't know, but there's a rightness to it. So it's less of it is the standard, and the other things are the negation of the standard, or the removal of the standard.
Well, we also get in chapter 6 the first first time that the word grace is used in the Bible, and so Noah isn't just saved because of his righteousness, but his righteousness extends God's grace. And so I think like there's an important part in here of like I think you could potentially read the story of Noah did all of the right things. But that would, I think, so if maybe I'm interpreting what you just said wrong, but it's not simply you did all the right things and then now you're saved. There's a whole aspect of that. First is but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and he was looked upon because of some of the righteousness that he was doing. And Noah wasn't doing what was right out of fear of a flood. He was doing right, and then there was a flood. Like he wasn't motivated by fear, and like this I think is an important understanding of why Noah, why his family then, because God wants to start a new version of humanity in this story with righteousness, and with a family that has his grace upon them.
Yeah, and a commitment to not wipe out what is right.
Yeah.
There seems to be. So there's salvation here if we want to bring in some other ideas. As always, I'll caution against bringing them in too early. Allow the story to exist on its own and then start going, I wonder, I start feeling like this, what I'm getting at is kind of feels like what I'm hearing from the New Testament. And you go, oh, okay. Let's engage about that because that's possible. And leaving it in the area of, that's possible. So that you can have a conversation about it rather than this is calm down. It probably is, but let's get there. And so you get idea of rightness. You get the idea of, as Eric's talking about, grace. And the word he's pointing to is often translated as favor. We got God's favor. And why? because he's acting right. he you know, and there doesn't seem to be this religious setup, at least in this story, as far as religion and rites and sacrifices and things at this point. Doesn't mean they didn't exist. It just doesn't seem. I mean, we see one after the flood, and so anyway, that seems to be the setup that's going on and what the response. So there's tons of evil. God's like, and we can have conversations about why is there evil on the planet? How can there be a good God with evil and things like that? And the intention of the story wasn't to answer that, but when we start having these, once we have the story and we can start having these extended conversations or these different conversations and bring in pieces of story. This is how we engage. When we get good at Bible, we can engage the Bible with these things, using these within our repertoire to have these conversations, have great thoughts about what God is doing, what God has done, and what he will do.
Yeah, it's good. Interesting thing. I think. By the way, I noticed in editing these episodes that I use that word a lot. Interesting. Everything's interesting to me. So
we all have our fillers.
I thought
that is fascinating.
I thought this was worth mentioning. I'll say it that way.
Nice.
Floods in the ancient world were actually a weapon. Kings and like generals of the armies back then used floods as a weapon. So it wasn't just like this random like method that God used to wipe humans out. It was an act of war. If you look at it that way, like he's warring against his own creation, which I think just puts even more significance in chapter 9, which I want to skip to really quickly. Chapter 9, verse 12, it says, then God said, I'm giving you a sign of my covenant with you and with all the living creatures for all generations to come. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. It is a sign of my covenant with you and with all the earth. When I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant with you and all with all living creatures. Never again will floodwaters destroy all life. When I see the rainbow in the clouds, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and every living creature on earth. So the 40 days on the boat happen. They're in the boat for 40 days, and then he sends out the bird, and the bird doesn't come back. And so then God tells him, okay, leave the boat and all that.
Yeah.
And come out, and then God makes this covenant with them. He gives them the rainbow. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I love it. I'm as a storyteller, I love symbolism. I love visual symbols that can be placed around us, and that God would take refracted light that only comes in our visual spectrum from when rain shows up. The very thing that was the thing they should have been terrified. God now uses it as a symbol of a natural symbol of his presence still existing and his promises still being there. And so I'm a big fan of the symbolic stuff of that, and what a tool as a writer, as a storyteller, and then to establish a regular covenant with people that when they see this, one, they're going to see rain differently. It's going to feed them. It's going to give them crops. It's going to take care of them. It's God covering them. And there's an anticipation that every time you see rain, although it might flood your field, there's still a promise that it's not going to flood your life. I love that. Yes, symbols all the way. Anytime we can get them in the Bible, let's go. Take that, run with it, and make that good. Yeah, right. Fist pump, ready to go. Those everyday symbols we still get to experience today. How often do we get that? We don't get, we get rainbows still now. We don't get, if at all, any of these things, except for big boats, cruise ships. I guess we're still taking big boats out on the ocean.
Yeah, boats were weird. That if we're looking for odd things, odd
Yeah.
is that there's these Nephilim, certainly that whatever, but then the boat is huge, it's gigantic and made out of wood.
Cedar.
And people are like, we found it. You didn't find it. It's wood. Is
It's
it
gone.
magic wood? At a minimum, even if you're a short-term Earth person, man, this was thousands of years ago. That
Yeah.
wood is not there anymore.
It's eroded. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, but the boat's weird. The rain, it's not just rain, right? It's water coming out of the deep. It's every place in the ancient world water was coming from. It came from there. So water's everywhere. Chaos reigns again and wipes out the intended order. We end up with this, and what we end up with is hopeful in the sense that there's that rainbow and there seems to be some measure of hope that God recommits. But man, we have a changed humanity after this. Everything has changed. Almost like to jump way forward, it's almost like seeing it's when people had seen the old temple and now saw the new temple, and it was smaller and less ornate, and they wept over it. And I don't know, there's a sadness for me as I come to the end of closer to the end of this particular incident in this story. And I think that's, I think it's what I'm supposed to feel at this. I go, oh, the original thing. We get lost in well, did the atmosphere change? I don't know. And if you think it did, great. I just am like, what this story is saying, man, God actually had to change things so that there's only so much damage we could do to ourselves and all of creation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's enough of that. But and so going forward, man, this is at least we know things are going to all work out from here.
Yeah. I love that.
That's a
Yeah.
joke,
Well, I mean, well, it's on the path of like continue, of getting to that.
Well,
like
toward redemption. If there's a great book called The Epic of Eden, and the idea that she presents is that the salvation process over all of time is to return back to the original intent.
Yeah,
I
love that.
So.
Yeah, I love the symbolism of the temples. Like that's been something as a church planter that I've used that as a really great in my prayer time. And so the familiarity with the story just rang true for me. But that like don't look at the new temple as bad. Like what God is going to do in Zerubbabel's temple is actually the Son of God is going to walk through that one. This one we had the presence and it was housed there, but this time you're going to interact with the presence of God. Like, so yes, it's smaller, but it's going to do greater. So yes, this new earth is going to be different, but what it's going to birth is something even greater. If only God's promise, his covenant.
I skipped over a part that I think is really important. Chapter 9, verse 1, it says, "Then God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. All the animals of the earth and all the birds of the sky, all the small animals that scurry along the ground, all the fish in the sea will look upon you with fear and terror. I have placed them in your power.'" And so that just throws me right back to Genesis 1, where God created and it was very good. And then he saw man. He saw man. And he said, "Be fruitful and multiply. I put everything in your power." It's like going. It really is like a reboot. God is saying like, "All right, take two."
But I'd say a standard one. There isn't. I have to look at the words, but the original it translates subdue, but it's lead. But now we get the idea that they're going to be terrified of you, probably rightfully so. We've changed the relationship again between humankind and the rest of creation. So, yeah, it's So yes, I 100% agree, Ryan. Yeah, that this is it is a recreation. It is yeah, that's what's being accomplished, I think. So,
I also think it's last thing, and then we can
yeah.
end it. I think I almost said it. I think it's worth
What's
noting.
interesting? What is interesting, right?
So I actually heard Dr. Scott Booth talk about this. He's a professor at Pillar Seminary, and he talked about the rainbow. I think it was Scott Booth. He talked about the rainbow, and I talked about how the flood was an act of war and that kind of thing. They said a rainbow, like in the ancient world, handing a bow to your enemy with the bow part facing you was like a almost creating a peace treaty, saying like, I'm not not a threat to you anymore. I'm not going to harm you anymore. And so if you think about a rainbow and how it's oriented, the bow part is pointed up, which is the realm of God, right? And so like the symbolism there you go, Eric, is like God is making a treaty. He's making that covenant. I'm never gonna hurt you like this again. You know, you can count on it. And so I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So
Nice. It's awesome.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we end this thing?
I think we did it.
Yeah.
I think that Disney is fallen from grace, and they're no longer a part of the Illuminati.
I would agree.
Okay.
That's Bob Iger's fault.
There you go.
All right. Well, let's end this thing. If you're liking what you're hearing from the Odd Testament podcast, like us, subscribe to us, hit the notification bell, all those good things. Find us on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, and every other place, the book face and all that. Like, find us, like us, connect with us. We want to hear from you, and I would love to hear if you guys have any questions. If there's anything that you're like wrestling with, like, man, I want to hear these guys talk about this. We'd love to hear from you. Comment on this podcast or on our social media, or maybe even shoot us an email at oddtestamentpod@gmail.com. So, yeah, super excited about this, guys. I love that I get to do this with you.
Heck yeah, me too.
I guess
all right,
you guys.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.
We will see you next time.